Modern Love, the podcast, is made possible with support from Living Proof. Living Proof's dry shampoo is so good at absorbing sweat that you can take a spin class and not wash your hair. See for yourself. Use code LOVE at livingproof.com for a free travel-sized dry shampoo with your $20 order. Living Proof. We are the science. You are the living proof. And by Squarespace. Whether a blogger, artist, or entrepreneur, build a website that looks professionally designed, regardless of your skill level. Get a free trial and use code MODERNLOVE to get 10% off on your first purchase. You should. Squarespace.
From the New York Times and WBUR Boston, this is Modern Love. Stories of love, loss, and redemption. I'm your host, Meghna Chakrabarty. We all project our issues, right? Onto our friends, our family, co-workers. Well, this story makes me think that we project our deepest and most complex emotions onto our pets. The story is brought to life by Jason Alexander. You know him as George Costanza from the iconic 90s sitcom Seinfeld. But you're going to hear another side of the versatile actor. Here's his reading of Dan Barry's Modern Love piece, Just One Last Swirl Around the Bowl.
My daughter's stupid fish is dying. She is coping with the news by making the necessary arrangements for a burial at sea via a flushed toilet. To her, death is an unformed concept. She is 5 3/4 years old. I, though, am unnerved by the fish's approaching demise. I gaze into the clear, round bowl, hoping for another performance of its darting dance of life. Instead, I see only a creature as still as the ceramic mermaid it leans against, save for tiny gills that seem to be gasping. This is crazy, I know. The fish is well more than 3 years old and cost about $3 at the local pet store. It is the size and color of a Dorito. In the unnatural, natural order of things, its kind are like disposable toys. We humans usually consider fish like this to be eminently flushable. I'm just not up to it. For the record, I am a fish person only in the sense that I like to eat them. Then why have I become emotionally attached to a pocket-sized creature that lives in a cocoon of water? It does not sleep in my lap. We do not play fetch. Never once have I taken it for a walk or even a swim. A satisfactory answer evades me. But in its BB-size eyes I see, or I think I see, the panic before acceptance. I've seen that before in other eyes, and never mind. Just know that I have become a caregiver to a $3 fish that could fit in my mouth. Every day now I shake out 7 or 8 pellets and carefully fling them into the bowl one by one, aiming the brown specks so they descend where the fish can eat them with minimal movement. Sometimes they float just beyond his mouth and he bites and misses. But there's little I can do. More than water separates us. Come on, eat something, please, I say, until I remember that I am pleading with a fish. Then come flashbacks of having said these very words before, with similar emphasis. Only they were associated with cans of Ensure, chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla, bought by the case years ago in the deluded belief that they could magically protect a loved one against cancer. Come on, eat something, please. Your body needs to be strong. All those cans of Ensure poured down the drain or thrown out unopened by the six-pack, by the case. Too painful to even keep in the house once their purpose had passed. Now about this stupid fish. It is known formally as John Cronin the Fish, and it goes way back in my young family. When my older daughter, Nora, got a tropical fish several years ago, my younger daughter, Grace, became mesmerized by the swimming, the swirling, the very being of such a wondrous thing. After studying it with focused intensity, Grace finally announced that she could not go on living the beginning of her days without a fish of her own. My wife, Mary, and I tried to impress upon her the many responsibilities of fish ownership: feeding the fish, cleaning the fish's bowl, feeding the fish, cleaning the fish's bowl, feeding the fish, cleaning the fish's bowl. But Grace was 2 at the time and besotted. If we had said she would have to carry the fish to the ocean every week so that it could confer with Poseidon, she would have said, "Yes, yes, yes, please, I want a fish, please, yes." Which is what we finally said after being shamed by Nora's sweet offer to use half her life savings, about $6, to buy a fish for her little sister. The family went to the pet store, spent more on the glass bowl than on its tenant, and covered the base of its new home with small phosphorescent rocks that looked like children's breakfast cereal. We then tucked that little mermaid upright into this Fruity Pebbles beach, but she kept listening to the side as though woozy from one too many Mai Tais at some figurine mixer. A morning ritual began. My wife made the coffee, let the dog out, gently roused the girls, and did pretty much everything else that makes morning so glorious an entrance into another day. My role simply was to choose some ill-timed moment, say the last-minute school bus scramble, to call out, "Did anyone feed John Cronin the fish?" Over the years, the fish demonstrated a will to live so strong that I could not shake the old Monty Python "I'm not dead yet" routine from my twisted mind. Just one example. In carefully preparing for a 2-week vacation last summer, we corralled a relative to feed John Cronin the fish the first week, and a neighbor to feed him the second week. But in the end, it was as though these conversations had been conducted at the town pool underwater, because John Cronin the fish wasn't fed for nearly 2 weeks. When we returned, we tried to ease our guilt by sending a plentiful rain of pellets cascading down around him. He accepted the food and did a twirl or two as if to say, "That's life." That is life. Though for the last few weeks, John Cronin the fish has not been enjoying it. Every morning now, I tap on the bowl in small applause, hoping this might initiate that affirming underwater ballet. But he remains still, his bowl's glass magnifying the whisper of his gills. All I can do is reach again for the small cardboard cylinder of fish food. As these brown bits of sustenance pause on water's surface, then begin their dreamlike descent to those fruity pebble rocks, I think of the sugary tea and cinnamon toast that my mother, 10 years gone, would serve me when I stayed home from school, partly sick, partly seeking reassurance that she would always, always be there when I needed her. Kids think like that. Many years later, I tried to repay the favor when my mother became wholly sick, not partly sick. "Have a sip of tea," I would say. "Have a bite of toast. Have some Ensure. Chocolate, strawberry, vanilla." But she would not. She would smile, shake her head, and look away with a gaze that was past panic. She was 61. I look now at the food pellets gathered around the fish, my face nearly pressed against the glass of the bowl. "Eat," I say sharply. My wife calls from the kitchen. "Is everything all right up there?" "Everything's fine," I call back, not wanting to get into it. And then back to the fish. "You stupid fish," I hiss. "Eat." It was the same with my father last year at the Veterans Home. At his bedside, measuring the inhalations, hoping against the evidence that he would rouse and ask for a roast beef sandwich on rye with brown mustard, a piece of Enderman's cake, a good cup of coffee, a glass of water. Just water would have delighted me. His appetite was considerable once. On Thanksgiving, my father would delight in the tray of olives and celery presented by my mother. He had a deliberate way of sprinkling salt on the stalk, then onto the turkey and stuffing and candied yams and potatoes and string beans and pie and more pie. "A sip of water, Dad. Just a sip." I, too, have watched from the other side of the glass. In a hospital bed and in my own bed, so sick from surgery and chemotherapy and radiation that the very thought of a stalk of celery or a sprinkling of salt would make me gag. And here would come my wife, setting down a tray of tea and toast, gently encouraging me to eat because she didn't know what else to say, other than that she loves me, just as I had said to my mother and father. Now this stupid fish, contained in its own universe, yet part of mine, sharing space on my 5-year-old daughter's dresser with a few stray playing cards, some mismatched socks, and a magnetic music box. You wind it up and 2 ladybug figurines spin and skate upon a green pond, all to the theme song from Love Story. I wind up the box to hear the music. How does it go again? Where do I begin to tell the story of how great a love can be? Officially, I detest this theme from Love Story, but right now, it doesn't seem so bad, as 2 inanimate bugs made of wood and magnets come to life. All the while, John Cronin the fish remains as still as ceramic. Stupid fish. Stupid, beautiful fish.
Jason Alexander, reading Dan Barry's modern love piece, Just One Last Swirl Around the Bowl. There's more after the break when I sit down with Dan Jones, editor of the Modern Love column, and the essay writer Dan Barry, along with his daughter Grace.
I'm Katie at Living Proof, and we get love letters all the time, like this one. Dear Living Proof, my hair feels great, just like it used to feel before all the coloring. And not just pathetic wisps blowing in the wind, but a real head of hair to let fly with pride. I could woo Eric Clapton from the 10th row with this hair. Love, Sally. You can use the code LOVE for a free travel-size dry shampoo with your $20 order. livingproof.com.
This is Modern Love, the podcast. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty, and we're joined now by New York Times columnist Dan Barry and his 12-year-old daughter Grace. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Well, also with me in the studio here is Daniel Jones, editor of the Modern Love column for the New York Times. Good to see you again, Dan.
Good to be here.
Okay, so Dan, first of all, can I just ask, John Cronin the fish?
Yes.
How's he doing?
He is no longer with us. He's in the great sea in the sky, or the great sea beneath us. I don't know.
And did he get a funeral? How did you observe his passing?
As I remember it, I think it was the traditional way, down a porcelain chute into the next world.
And Grace, what did you think of that?
Well, I remember asking my dad to say a speech over the toilet.
I think everybody wept.
So, Daniel, let me ask you, what did you think when this story came to you from Dan Barry, your Times colleague?
You have to understand that my job is really about saying no more than anything else. I say no about 150 times a week and yes once. And I get a fair number of stories about memorializing lost pets. And they're pretty much a no from the get-go. And so I read the beginning, and I just thought, oh no, Dan Barry has written a column about his daughter's dying goldfish, and this is going to be some sentimental thing that I'll have to handle very, very gently and sort of let him down somehow. Anyway, so I began reading into it very tentatively, And of course, this piece becomes about so much more than this goldfish, and just becomes deeper and more complicated and more moving. And it's one of my favorite pieces that we've ever run in the column.
Thank you.
Well, Dan, Barry, why did you want to share this story as a modern love story?
Well, it's clearly a broad interpretation of love, and I really was surprised by my own reaction to this dying fish. I couldn't quite understand why I was getting so upset about it, and I thought more and more about it, and it was really about mortality and trying to hold on to people we love, and also with my own flirtation with mortality, having gone through cancer twice. And it struck me, it's really about that.
Well, Grace, your dad just described that he had been sick a couple times, and that both your grandparents were sick and passed away. How much do you remember?
Well, my dad's dad, I remember seeing him at a nursing home.
My father was in a veterans facility.
Yeah, I remember you walking him into the bathroom. I was little, and I had just stopped having my mom take me to the bathroom. And I thought, when I get older, is she going to have to take me again?
I can see how that must have been, really confusing for you as a kid. But Dan, Barry, one of the things that really resonated with me is that as adults, I guess that confusion is expressed more as anger. And you're really honest about how angry we can feel when our closest loved ones are fading away.
Well, that's what struck me, too. I remember feeling that anger as well, particularly with my mother. You delude yourself sometimes into thinking, if only she would have, say, 2 or 3 milkshakes a day, all will be well. Mm-hmm. In other words, she will build up her strength and will move on. And that's the anger, because I think deep down that's not the case. And deep down I knew when these little flakes of food were hitting the fish on its nose and it wasn't able to summon the strength to even open its mouth, it reminded me of my mother and my father and the anger that comes with loss.
Well, we actually asked Jason Alexander, the actor who read this essay, why he picked this one in particular and why he connected with it. And here's what he had to say.
My dad made it to 91 and had a really kind of wonderful life and a fairly easy passing. But the last couple of weeks as he laid in the hospital and he refused to eat and really couldn't drink, he was afraid of choking on the water. And I remember, just to make him comfortable, getting a spray bottle, something that you might mist a plant with, and just spraying some water into his mouth just so he didn't have that cottony dry feeling in his mouth. So there's lots of these moments that just, when you read them, strike you as a parent and as a child, and I guess because of that I was drawn to it.
Dan, what do you think of that?
I think we all have had versions of that, these small moments, almost silly moments of trying to make the loved one more comfortable, and you look back on it, they become profound moments.
Well, and it must just change to have, the parent be the vulnerable one, when the child was the one who was, expected the parent to be the caretaker, and then to have those roles reversed.
Right. The fish was never there for me, though. It was really a one-way street with the fish.
Grace, this is pretty heavy stuff for a 12-year-old, right. But I'm wondering, when you hear your dad sharing these thoughts, what does it make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel like he's a whole different person, because usually he doesn't show too much emotion, because that's the role that dads play. They're usually protective, and they'll protect you from anything, and they'll always be there for you. But hearing my dad talk about his dad, who always protected him, it's a different dad.
Do you like seeing
a better dad?
I was going to say, do you like seeing that part, the side of your dad?
It's kind of different, but I like it because it proves to me that he's been through my pain, feeling emotions and everything, and I feel like I connect to him.
That's so
Thank you, Grace.
Nicely put, Grace. I think you might be a future journalist.
Don't wish that on her.
Grace, do you have a new fish?
No, I never got another fish.
We couldn't go through the trauma, but we have a black lab, and Grace is quite connected to our black lab named Tilly.
Well, Dan Barry is the author of this week's story, Just One Last Swirl Around the Bowl. He is an author and longtime columnist and reporter for the New York Times, and his next book, The Boys in the Bunkhouse, Servitude and Salvation in the Heartland, will be out in the spring. Dan Barry, great pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much.
And Grace Barry is 12 years old. She's a 7th grader. And Grace, I have to say, you were my favorite guest so far. Thank you so much for speaking with us, too.
Thank you for having me.
And Dan Jones, editor of the Modern Love column for the New York Times and author of Love Illuminated, exploring life's most mystifying subject with the help of 50,000 strangers. Dan, it's always great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Meghna.
Special thanks to Jason Alexander for narrating this week's episode. He'll be performing with the Phoenix Symphony later this month and at the Cincinnati Music Hall this March. Next week on Modern Love, Sarah Paulson, known for her work in Carol, 12 Years a Slave, and American Horror Story, narrates a piece where a mother struggles with a decision that's both her greatest accomplishment and deepest regret.
But it seemed like gentle math. Girl with child she can't keep, plus woman who wants but can't have child. Balance the equation, and both parties become whole again. But open adoption is an awkward choreography. I am offered a place at the table, but I am not sure where to sit.
Modern Love is a production of WBUR, Boston's NPR station, and The New York Times. It's produced, directed, and edited by Jessica Alpert, John Perotti, and Anne-Marie Sievertson. The idea for the Modern Love podcast was conceived by Lisa Tobin. Iris Adler is our executive producer. Daniel Jones is the editor of Modern Love for The New York Times and advisor to the show. Original music composed by Mike Moschetto, and special thanks to BSX Records for letting us use Mark Northam's recording of the theme from Love Story. It's available on iTunes. Let us know what you think of this episode and get some Modern Love extras on Facebook. Just visit facebook.com/modernlove. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Modern Love on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Meghna Chakrabarti. Thanks for listening.